get. Yeah. Okay, we stopped here because
Took my allergy medicine
this is where my Uncle Leland, my dad's brother, just older than him, had a place here. It was part of their dad's place. His house, a log house set here, and there's some outbuildings on the other side of the street. And that log house still exists. It's on the Phil Lucas place, Rod Lucas place, there in Spring Gulch. He bought that cabin and they moved it off and moved it down there and turned it into a bunkhouse. But that building still exists. And my parents were married and lived just across the street in a 2-room log cabin, which they moved up to Ditch Creek, up to Science Camp. It still exists up there. And there's a story. I was only 6 months old, and my mother, I had 2 older sisters and an older brother, and she left them in charge of me, and I was on this bed. Of course, it was a 2-room cabin, and there were slats in this bed. Well, I'd wiggled around, and the other kids didn't pay any attention, and I slid through. My head was so big, the rest of me went through, but my head hung up. And Mother had gone out to the wood pile or something, or for some reason. Anyway, she come back in here, and here where I was hanging. Well, she got me out, and of course I wasn't breathing. She didn't know what to do, so she grabbed me. It was in the wintertime, and she run down the street here to my Uncle Leland's place, and I was turning blue, and running down the street, she was jostling me. When she got down here, well, I was alive. And the doctor said later on that was probably the best thing she ever did, is grab me and run down the road jostling me to get the air, get me to breathing again. And here I am 73 years later, and I'm still alive. So, but this was where my Uncle Leland lived, and he left the valley. He had a big family, and he went, during the war, he went up and worked up at the dam for the Bureau of Reclamation as a guard. During the war, anything like that, they had round-the-clock guards. And then they went from there to American Fork, Utah, and then later on up to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. That end of the family, we kind of, well, I got a whole lot of cousins, kind of lost track of them. But we'd go up the road another, up to the East Canal, and we'll stop there, and that was the original James Henry May's place. I should have had some pictures, and I'm sorry I didn't, but I didn't get enough pictures put together. And that's where my grandparents lived, on the May side. We're gonna, as we go out, we'll get into the Moultons. That was my mother's side of the family, and they were the ones that were in the Willie Handcart Company, the Moultons. Charles Alma Moulton was 6 months old when they crossed the Atlantic Ocean. He was born at sea. He was 6 months old when they got nailed down at Rocky Gulch over there by Land or Riverton. Every one of them made it. And, they were given a blessing. Parley Pratt or somebody like that gave them a blessing when they left England. If they were faithful, they would make it to Salt Lake. Well, they did. There was 8 kids, and Mom and Dad, he was only 6 months old. They said when they got to Salt Lake, hold him up and almost read the newspaper through him. He was skinny, but he made it. That was my great-great-grandfather. Yeah. So this was May on both sides. Granddad had about 1,000 acres, and he run about 500 head of mother cows. And of course, when we got our hay up, then the boys all got sent to Granddad to work. I loved my grandparents something fierce, but Grandpa was a type of guy that he didn't stop for lunch till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Of course, a growing boy, my God, Ned, that was the only part I hated about it, was lunch being late. Dad, 12 o'clock was lunch. Grandpa, no, we'll eat lunch when we get around to it. So we'll go on out now, and we'll stop where the buildings were. Granddad's buildings were just another 400 or 500 yards.
This is the same road then? This road hasn't changed?
No, this road hasn't changed.
This
no.
was the road?
This was the road. Yeah, and it's got gravel on it now till you get out here to where it turns to mud. Yeah. So we'll move on out a ways now. Only band of sheep that I remember in Jackson Hole, you run them on Blacktail Butte. And they kept them right there on that knoll at night. They'd bring them down. They had a enclosure there, corral that they could keep the coyotes and stuff out of them at night.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'd go up that, we call that the sheep draw. Now, he'd send a kid, one of his kids always had to herd the sheep all day long.
Oh, yeah.
And
Did you use dogs or anything like that for the
No.
sheep? Or, no.
they didn't need dogs. They didn't have that many, a couple hundred heads all they had.
Huh.
Yeah.
Was it this green? I mean, did you have a lot of rain in the spring? They were greening up kind of like
Depending on the
this,
years.
Just
It's
depends.
especially green this year, but not really outly abnormal, no.
It
Of
looks
course,
like
it was well irrigated. They started irrigating up by Kelly, and it was well irrigated. There was a slough down along the subwater come out down there. Because we were the first ones, we were the first canal on this Grove on, so we got the water.
Ah, yeah.
We didn't have the first water rights. Cliff Hansen had the first water rights. And he used to come up and shut us down a little once in a while, but when you're the first guy on the ditch, why,
Yeah.
you get the water.
Was Kelly a pretty big town, you said? It was bigger than
Kelly?
Jackson?
Well, a dozen buildings, yeah. It's still bigger than Jackson.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it got wiped out. Kelly never
Never recovered?
Never recouped. Yeah. Never recouped.
Is there anyone in Kelly that stayed put after the flood?
Oh yeah,
Just
there was quite a few, but there'd be a few ancestors now, but very few.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you guys didn't get.
No, it didn't.
It
Flood
really-
didn't get over here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll stop here. This was called the East Lane.